Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Estate Planning TV. I'm your host, Christopher Small, and this is the internet's most passionate show about estate planning. And real quick, if you're listening to this intro, then what you are about to hear is one of my recent Facebook Live videos. If you haven't seen one of those before or didn't know about them, then please go and check out my Facebook page, CMS Law Firm, so that you don't miss them. All right, without further ado, here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Estate Planning TV. I'm your host, Christopher Small. I'm the owner of CMS Law Firm. We do estate planning, we do probate, that is it. You know, our motto is live a rich life, leave a rich legacy, and this is the internet's most passionate show about estate planning. And today, by the way, hello everyone. Today I'm pretty excited. Because we actually have a good episode for you today. Something a little bit out of the ordinary. Normally I'm on here just answering kind of frequently asked questions. Normally I'm kind of staying relatively sort of high level, not getting into the weeds too much. Today we're going to get into the weeds a little bit, and it's because today's topic is so fun, so fascinating, so divisive for so many reasons. But today we're going to talk about how the Trump family, Fred Trump, Mary Trump, Donald Trump, and his brothers and sisters avoided estate taxes when Donald Trump's parents passed away. And before that even. So they avoided gift taxes, they avoided all kinds of fun stuff. And they did it in some I don't know if I would describe them as unique ways, but they did it in some ways that some people may or may not find interesting. But I wanted to start, by the way, with a couple of ground rules. Okay, first things first. I found this quote. I didn't find it. I knew about this quote, and I've known about it for a long time, and it's the truth. And I thought I would start with that. Okay. And by the way, if you see me looking a little bit off the camera, it's because I have notes. This is a long one. Okay, so buckle up, boys and girls. This is going to be a longer episode, probably 10, 15 minutes. So, Learned Hand, who is a relatively famous Supreme Court justice in legal circles, because of his intellect and his analysis, but also just because he's got one of the coolest names in law. He's not around anymore. He once famously said, "Anyone may so arrange his affairs that his taxes shall be as low as possible. He is not bound to choose that pattern which will best pay the Treasury. There is not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes." All right? I wanted to start with that because I think it's important to remember that this is the baseline. We are not obligated to pay taxes. Okay? Well, let me put it this way. We are not obligated to pay more than the taxes that we are obligated to pay, which means the lowest amount possible under the rules, right? And this is totally off topic, but I listened to an income tax podcast from a guy who's an accountant, and yes, I'm a dork. I listened to an income tax podcast, and I think it's actually quite interesting. But he makes a point. He sort of characterizes income taxes and taxes in general in a way that I had never heard of before. And really, the way that the taxes are set up, the actual taxes that you pay are very, that part of the code is very small. What the rest of the code is outlined to do is incentivize you to take action. So it's sort of like getting a discount at, the store, any store, right? What they're saying is, we want you to act over here. We want you to put your money over here. So if you do, we're going to give you a break, right? We're going to give you a tax break, basically. So just remember that we are starting from that proposition. If you don't agree with that, then thank you for paying more taxes than you're obligated to, I guess, okay? But here in the legal world, here in the real world, we want to pay only the taxes that we are supposed to pay under the rules. All right, so we're going to try to get those taxes as low as possible. Okay, now, that's ground rule number one. Ground rule number two, by the way, although we are talking about the Trumps, they are politically dynamite, right? Not in a good way or a bad way, like literally explosive. This is not a political podcast, okay? This is not a political episode. I'm not here to talk politics. I'm not here to tell you whether being any party is right or wrong. Okay, that's not what we're about. That's not what this episode is about. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you like Trump, you hate Trump, I want you to listen to this show because it's important. Okay, that's ground rule number 2, I guess. Ground rule number 3 is that this is not also a show about whether or not Trump is a good person overall, whether Trump family are good people. That's not why we're here, okay? We're here to learn from what they've done to see if we can save some money, to see if we can organize our own lives and our own families to create generational wealth, which I think there's no doubt that they've done a good job of that. That's what this show is all about, okay? So I'm not even gonna tell you whether or not I like him or don't like him, okay? Although I really want to, but I'm not going to, okay? All right, so, yeah, so so what we're really here to do today is to look at the ways that how the Trump family sort of avoided or reduced or eliminated estate taxes. And I wanted to have this episode for 3 main reasons. One, I think when you talk about estate planning, when you talk about estate taxes, when you talk about income taxes, when you talk about business, when you talk about generational wealth, when you talk about any of these things, I think it's always easier to do so with sort of a real world example. That's number 1. Number 2, I want you to see the value of using a good estate planning attorney. Okay, you cannot do this stuff with Rocket Lawyer or whatever other sort of do-it-yourself software that you want to use. Okay, there's a reason for that because it's sort of complicated, and the payoff is huge. So you could save many hundreds of thousands of dollars probably by spending only few small thousands of dollars potentially. Okay, and then number 3, the third reason we're going to talk about this is because this is my show, and I think it's interesting. Okay, so if you don't like it, you don't have to watch. If you're interested, keep watching. We're going to break down how Trump saved millions, literally, on estate taxes. So that's that. Now, one other caveat, that I want to talk about is that as we get into this, what you're going to see is they utilized some estate tax planning strategies that everyone can use, okay? But because they were business owners, they really had a lot of flexibility and a lot of additional strategies that were open to them that many other people may not be, okay? So I just want to point that out because I think it's a big factor. That doesn't mean to say that if you find yourself in this high net worth position that you can't create some businesses and create some business organizations to sort of do some of these things, because the Trump family did that as well as owning legitimate businesses. They also created companies just for estate planning purposes. But keep that in mind, okay? That when you have these business structures in place, you're just afforded greater flexibility and you can do other things. Okay, now let's get into the show. Finally, right? We've set all the ground rules. It's time to talk Trump estate taxes. Now, I want to preface this, I guess, too, by saying that the things that we're going to talk about today, I gleaned or I took out of that New York Times article that was just released that sort of ran through some of the estate planning and estate tax strategies that they discovered were implemented with the Trump family through their reporting efforts, okay? Because I don't have this information anywhere else. So everything I say is going to be based on that article, okay? And really, the only thing that what I really needed was just a framework to see what they did, to talk about how those strategies sort of work in general. Okay. Now, to begin, what I really want to do is start at the end. So within this article, they estimated that Fred and Mary Trump, who are Donald Trump's parents, when they passed away or over the course of their lives, they had accumulated an estate that was worth around $1 billion. billion with a B, okay? 9 zeros. And when they passed away, they ended up paying, so what they should have paid with the estate tax at that time at 55% would have been $550 million in estate taxes. Okay, that is a big check. What they ended up paying in reality was about $52 million, or 5% of their of the estate went to estate taxes. Okay, so in reality, they were not able to completely eliminate estate taxes 100%, but they were basically able to pay 1/10 of the estate tax that they were owed. If you just look at it just straight away on paper, this is the number, this is the tax, this is the amount that should be paid. All right, so that's a significant savings, right? If I told you I was going to give you 90% off of anything, you would take it, and that's what they were able to do. Okay. Now the way I've broken this down is to basically I went through the article and I just wrote down all of the methods that I could see that they used to avoid estate taxes, and I basically came up with 9 of them. Okay, so I'm just going to run through those one at a time, talk about them, break them down, and then we'll get out of here. Okay, so if I'm going too slow for you right now, which I doubt it because I'm a super fast talker, and I'm going to take a drink of my coffee right now because I'm thirsty. Put me on 1.5 speed. See how that goes. All right, so method number 1, and I've been learning about this recently because I think this is super cool and interesting. Fred was able to transfer a significant amount of his wealth to Donald and to his other siblings via salaries. Okay, the way that you do this is you basically hire your kid into the company and you pay them some money. The downside to that is that the kids are going to have to pay estate or income taxes on that money. The upside is those income taxes, because they're kids or because they're young adults or because they're not super rich, are typically paying significantly lower amounts of taxes based on that income level than you would if it were in estate tax. Right? There's no income tax bracket that's at 55%. These guys are probably paying in that like 20% income tax range. And what they did was Fred took this to the next level. So instead of hiring Donald for one thing, he hired him for like 10 things. Donald was, he was an employee of a company or many companies. He was a property manager. He was a landlord. He was a banker. He was a consultant. Okay, he did all of these things and was paid money for all of these things from Fred Trump. And that is a way to basically move this money over to Donald without having to pay estate taxes. All right. Let me break this down to you as an example. Let's say, I know one of the examples in the article was Fred was trying to offload some shares of stock or some company shares. It wasn't stock, but it was shares of his company to someone or to something. And so what he did was he hired Donald to broker the deal, and he ended up paying Donald on top of the money that the family just gets from selling the shares, $1 million as a consultant from brokering this deal. That's one of the ways that you can transfer wealth from the older generation to the younger generation. You just hire them. For example, and by the way, I am not an accountant, I am a lawyer. This is not tax advice, okay? By the way, let me give this disclaimer right in the middle where nobody can see it. What I'm telling you right now is tax information. It is not tax advice. If you run out and try to do this on your own without calling me or calling someone that knows what they're doing, you are taking a big risk. All right, so everything that I'm telling you right now and before this and after this is information only. Okay, perfect, here we go. You can pay your children up to $12,000 a year without having to pay any income tax at all. So you can bring them into the company, you can teach them how to do what you want to do, pay them 12 G's a year, and they don't pay any income tax at all. Okay, so you can start there. Obviously, like I said, Fred takes it to the next level. They don't care about the income tax, they're doing more. The second thing that he did was and this is a strategy that a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners use to spread the wealth. what Fred would do is when he needed to create a new company, and if you don't know, Fred was huge into real estate. He owned many apartment buildings, just a lot of land, owned a lot of other buildings. He just owned a lot of real estate. He was in the real estate game, big time. So when he knew that he was going to acquire a new project, what he would do sometimes is he would create a new company. Let's call it like Project Number 2 LLC. And what he would do is, instead of making himself the owner of the company, he would make his kids the owner of the company, and he would make himself president of the company. And so by doing that, he was able to ensure that basically every piece of money, of equity that was earned, every piece of income that was earned by this business became part of the kids' net worth, not his own. He would still run the company, he was still in charge of doing everything, but they would benefit. And it said that he was doing this when the kids were just really young, 3, 4, 5 years old. Even I think he started doing some of this stuff. So that is another way that happened. If you read the article, it talks about a company called All County Building Supply and Maintenance. This is what he did with that company. And I think we might talk about this later, but what he did with that company was he created this All County Building Supply and Maintenance. They became sort of a wholesaler or I guess a retailer for a lot of the goods that he would use in his apartment. And then what he would do is that company would go buy all these things that he needed, and then he would buy them from this company, mark them up a little bit, toss some more money to the kids, and everything was all good. Okay, I'm gonna take another drink. Now, with these first two methods, I wanted to take a second and make one important sort of side note. And that is that these two methods in particular take planning, right? You need to think about this. You need to be aware of these strategies. You can't just wing these necessarily. You want to implement them at the beginning of some of your companies, of some of your ideas and things like that. So if you are someone that owns businesses, if you are someone that is wealthy, right, then you need to consider reaching out to someone to talk about these strategies, to learn these strategies. You know, whenever people come into my office, I always tell them one of my biggest goals with this meeting is for you to walk out of here and be able to make an informed decision with regard to your money, with regard to your family, with regard to generational planning, with regard to estate taxes, with regard to everything. Because there's nothing worse than thinking one thing when in reality it's another. And you make choices based on your lack of knowledge, really can get you in trouble. So these first two methods, they can pay off big. They can be tremendous strategies, but they take some planning. Okay. The other thing too is that I really highly encourage you to try to do is to think of what we're doing here as a game, right? How much money can you save? How many strategies can you implement? If you try to find some way to make this stuff interesting, if you try to find some way to become engaged, the sky's the limit. Okay, this can actually become interesting and fun for you. Okay, and you can pass down more wealth, right? You can make more progress, right? You can save more on taxes, but nobody cares about that. Okay, method number 3. The third thing that the Trump family did to save on estate taxes was to make loans that were really sort of gifts in disguise, that were never repaid, that were never pursued by Fred, and that really at the end of the day, everybody in the family kind of knew would not be pursued, okay? That's an easy one. That kind of stuff happens all the time. They would actually literally create the contract, create the loan documents, sign them, execute them, but then nothing ever would happen. Sometimes there was no interest on the loans, or the interest was nominal. Sometimes they just wouldn't do anything on them, okay? So that's number 3. Okay, method number 4 is what we in the business call a GRAT. Now, warning, okay? We are about to get in the weeds here for a second and do some real estate planning talk. So what GRAT stands for is Grantor Retained Annuity Trust. All right? Let that sink in for a minute. Grantor Retained Annuity Trust. Okay? Right? Now, a couple things you need to know about this. First things first, it's an irrevocable trust. Okay? Once the trust is created and funded, the property that you put into this trust, you cannot get back. That's what sort of sometimes causes people to take pause and not really execute on these strategies, because in reality, this should be assets that you don't necessarily need, that you're not anticipating that you will need to rely on in the future. Although you'll see it can be, because you're going to get a kickback. Okay. Number two, the goal here is to shift wealth to the next generation with zero or as little estate or gift tax as possible. Okay. That's what this type of trust really exists for, is to do this. And by the way, again, this is something that's been created by the IRS or created by the government, regulated by the IRS, but these things exist for us to use them. Okay, so don't hate on Donald Trump for utilizing these things. Okay, don't hate on him for having Fred for having the foresight to learn about these things, understand them, implement them, use them, and crush it with them. Okay, now that you know those two things, here's generally how it works. Okay, you create this trust, the GRAT. You take an asset. Typically, it's something that spins off cash or something that can be liquidated, and you put this thing into this trust. And when you put this thing into this trust, the trust itself is created with the understanding that a certain amount of this trust asset is going to spin off cash back to the grantor. That's where the annuity comes into play. Okay, so if you take $1 million and you put it over here, the trust is then going to spin off a certain amount of money over time, anywhere from like 2 to 10 years, 2 to 20 years. And it's going to spin off a certain percentage of the asset itself. It's also going to spin off a certain amount of interest that is set by the IRS. Typically, this interest rate is very, very, very low. All right. So, once that time period passes, once the annuity is paid off, whatever is left into the trust is then outside of the estate of the person that created the trust, and it's not counted again for estate tax purposes. No estate taxes are owed, no gift taxes are owed. It's a clean wash. It's like it's out of their estate, right? So that is the benefit of this kind of a trust. And you can actually zero it out if you really want to. Now, you're probably like, okay, that's great. Do you really move that much cash or move that much of assets in this manner? The answer is, or can be, yes. Because what you can do is sort of, now we're about to get super, super in the weeds. You can stair step these GRATs if you want, okay? So you put $1 million in and it spins off 100K. You can take that 100K and you can put it in another GRAT. And you can do the same thing. So eventually almost all this money ends up out of your estate, okay? So just believe me here. The other thing that you do, or that you can do, or that you should do, or that people try to do, is to take highly appreciating assets and stick them in these GRATs. Because let's say you're paying 1% interest on the annuity, but the asset itself is growing at 20% interest. All of that growth doesn't count as part of your estate. All of that growth doesn't count for estate tax or gift tax purposes. Okay, so back to the story. Fred Trump took advantage and utilized the GRAT to a significant degree. Now, I don't know the specific number of trusts that the Trump family created, but it was many, okay? If you are doing serious estate planning, there's a high likelihood that you're gonna be creating a lot of trusts for these reasons. It's all part of this strategy. You know, it doesn't cost a lot of money to save a tremendous amount of money. You know, for example, you could save or move $1 million out of your estate and pay, pay $5,000 in attorney's fees or something like that. Okay. Now, by the way, if you come hire me, don't hold me to those numbers. I can't tell you exactly what your fee is going to be. Okay. I was giving you an example. Okay. But my fees are pretty good. They're flat. Okay, I don't charge by the hour. This is getting crazy. 25 minutes in, and we're on number 5. We're going to go fast now. Okay. Method number 5 is to just give your yearly gift tax exemption away. So everybody can give $30,000 or $15,000 a year to anybody that they want, as many times as they want. If you got 10 friends, you can give them all $15,000 each. You don't pay any estate taxes on that, or there's no gift taxes on that, nothing. If you're married, it's $30,000. That's why I spit $30,000 out of my mouth earlier. Because if you're married, each of you can give that away. So basically, Fred and Mary could give 30 grand away to each of their kids every year without having to really do anything. They just write a check. And they did that, okay? Number 6. Okay, so this is another sort of advanced estate planning strategy that a lot of people do. It's kind of, I think, fallen out of favor lately, but if it's done right, if it's done in the right circumstances, it can be a great idea. And the idea is to give away fractional shares of businesses that you own, which reduces the amount of your estate literally, because you're giving away those shares, but it also reduces the appraised value of the asset because it's now a fractional share and it's lost marketability and it's lost all these other things, right? It's harder to sell 2 shares of a private LLC than to sell 100% of it. And so Fred Trump would give fractional shares of his businesses to his kids, break it all up, and then they would reduce that, the value of that property, and do a whole bunch of other things with that, okay? But would also reduce his overall estate tax liability at the same time. If you had $1 million business, it's worth $1 million on paper, but you break it up, and so now it loses 30% of its value because of the loss of marketability. Now you've just saved, well, back then 55% of 300 is $160,000, right? You've basically just saved that money, put it in your pocket. Okay, we're getting crazy now. I can feel it. Method number 7. This is, I just sort of baked into other trust planning, okay? He did things like ground trusts, right? He did mortgage trusts. He did all kinds of stuff. A ground trust would be, and this is a real estate thing specifically, but he would buy land. He would move, okay, so he would buy a piece of property that was vacant. He would sell or give or create a trust and put that land in the trust. And then the trust would lease out the building or whatever improvements were on the building to some of Fred's company. So the trust got the benefit of owning the land and all that appreciation. It also got the cash spun off from Fred and his businesses, and it went to his kids, right, into this trust. He did that a bunch of different times. I think every new project he did that he could. He also would do mortgage trusts. I think maybe I talked about this. Oh, this is next. So the other thing that he did was create family mortgages in the same way. He would create a trust, and then the trust would buy the mortgages on these properties from the bank, and then Fred Trump would just pay these trusts his mortgage payments. More cash, plus interest to the family instead of to the bank, right? Method number 9, last but not least, and this is where we start to get like a little gray in some ways. I'll tell you this, by the way, before I get into this. The gray area for this Trump article has less to do with their non-payment of estate taxes and more to do with the way that they valued their property and the way that they were able to sort of get that through. But I have one idea on that I'll share for the end. Number 9, though, was that sometimes Fred would actually buy an interest in Donald's business, for example. He would give him a bunch of money, buy some shares, and then later he would sell those shares back to Donald at a reduced price, often significantly reduced. So he did 2 things. He got the cash out of his estate when he bought the shares, and then he got the shares out of his estate when he sold them back for nominal value. I think there was one instance in the article where he may have purchased some shares for like $1 million. These are total examples, and the numbers could be really, really wrong. And then he bought these shares for $1 million. So basically, he gave $1 million to Donald Trump.
And then a couple of years later, or maybe even a year later, he sold the shares back to Donald for like $9,000. Okay, so basically he was able to funnel almost $1 million to Donald Trump without having to pay gift taxes or estate taxes or anything like that. All right. Okay. The other thing that he would do sometimes too, we went back in method in number 3, we talked about the loans that were never repaid that were given to the kids. What he would also do sometimes is exchange those old debts that were owed for shares. So what he would say is, okay, you owe me $1 million. Instead, give me these shares. Okay, so he would erase that debt, basically do the same thing, and then he would sell those shares back at a discount. Okay, allegedly, I guess. I don't know if that matters. Okay, now, one of the important takeaways here is that a lot of these strategies in and of themselves, singularly, if you pull them out, they didn't all necessarily equate to significant, huge estate tax savings. It's sort of like death by 1,000 cuts in some ways, okay? Now, some of these made huge strides. Some of these had huge sort of benefits. But overall, and in many times, in many estate tax strategies, it's these death by 1,000 cuts, this planning that you do, that when you add up the whole, that's when you start to see the significant savings, right? That's when you start to see those big chunks moving out, because you got a little piece over here, a little piece over here, a little piece over there. They were, I think they said, I should just have the article up so I can reference it, but I think they said something like 300 different streams of revenue were created in this way over time by Fred Trump, all right? That's how he was able to save 90% on his estate taxes, okay? They just use the same methods over and over and over and over and over again, okay? Now, the sticky part are these property valuations, okay? They would present appraisals for their property that were, some would argue, significantly lower than the true market value. Now, all I'm going to say about that is, I don't know exactly what they were doing. I'm assuming that these were appraisals done by licensed appraisers. This information was given to the IRS. The IRS did audit it and often made little or no changes to those appraised values. So, while we can be angry at the Trump family for doing this, and maybe they were aggressive in some ways, maybe not, it's not really for me to say. What I can tell you is pretty much all of these, well, most of these techniques discussed today and in this article passed the smell test of the IRS. And like I said at the beginning, anyone may so arrange his affairs that his taxes shall be as low as possible. He is not bound to choose that pattern which will best pay the Treasury. There's not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. So, if you wonder how the Don did it, that's it. Now, if this stuff was interesting to you, I would love it if maybe you would share this with someone, maybe give me a comment, say, hey, Chris, good job. Ask me some follow-up questions based on this. We went through a lot of stuff today, sort of, like I said, at a high level, and it's interesting stuff. I think it's really cool. I think it's fun, and I think it's exciting. Hopefully my energy and excitement translated onto this video. And if you think you might need some estate planning help, whether super simple or super complicated, reach out to me. You can email me, chris@cmslawfirm.com. You can call me, 206-659-1512. You can send me a letter. You can do whatever you want. But if you do not have an estate plan at all, no matter how much money you have, you should get one. They're very important. They do some very fundamental things for everyone. If you have significant assets and you haven't planned well, you should do that, okay? You're leaving money on the table. You are potentially opening up multiple generations in the future to miss out on opportunities, okay? That's it. That's my sales pitch for today. I hope you really enjoyed this. Once again, I'm Christopher Small with CMS Law Firm. If you did enjoy this, please share it. Please send it somewhere. Please tag somebody that likes this. or that you think might be interested in this. And I'll talk to you again soon. See ya.